I found out my own mother was the one trying to take my kids away from me when I was sitting in a family courtroom under buzzing fluorescent lights, clutching a cheap purse in sweaty hands, and the judge said, "Ms. Baker, the petitioner alleges a pattern of neglect documented by multiple Child Protective Services reports over the last 3 years, most of them originating from the same concerned relative." And then he looked over his glasses straight at my mother and said her name, Mrs. Collins, like it was the most normal thing in the world that my mom, the woman who raised me, was asking the state to give her custody of my children because, in her words, I was unfit, unstable, and morally compromised. And I swear to you, for a second I thought I'd misheard him, because who hears the words concerned relative and thinks, oh, that must be my mom? I'm 34. I have 2 kids. Lily, who's 10, and Mason, who just turned 7. Their dad and I divorced 4 years ago after he decided he wanted to find himself with a 22-year-old bartender and a motorcycle he couldn't afford. He lives 2 states away, sends child support when the mood takes him, and FaceTimes the kids maybe once a month. For the last few years it's been me. A 2-bedroom rental that smells faintly like old carpet and fried onions no matter how much I bleach, 1 aging Corolla, and a rotating cast of cheap second-hand furniture. It's not fancy, but it's ours, and the kids are fed, loved, and as safe as I can make them. At least that's what I thought, until CPS started knocking on my door. The first time was 2 years ago. Lily came down with a stomach bug that wouldn't quit. Fever, vomiting, the works. I kept her home from school, called our pediatrician, got the "it's going around, keep her hydrated" spiel, and spent 3 days washing laundry and throwing out buckets of gross water. On day 4, when she finally kept toast down, I sent Mason to school and kept her home 1 more day for good measure. Around noon there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a woman in her 30s with a clipboard and a calm face. "Hi, I'm Denise from Child Protective Services," she said. "We received a report and just need to ask you a few questions." The floor dropped out from under me. All I could think was, the report? What report? I let her in because what else do you do? Lily was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching cartoons with that glassy look kids get when they're halfway back to normal. Denise asked to see the pantry, the kids' beds, checked the fridge to make sure there was food. She asked Lily some questions in a gentle voice. "Do you ever feel scared at home? Does mommy hit you? Do you get enough to eat?" Lily, bless her, blinked at her like she'd grown a second head and said, Mom bought me popsicles and Sprite, and she let me sleep in her bed when I was really pukey, so, no?" Denise left after an hour, said something about probably nothing, and we have to check these things out. I cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes from sheer humiliation. When I told my mother about it later on the phone, she clucked her tongue sympathetically. "There are some real busybodies out there," she said. "Maybe a neighbor saw the trash pile up and decided you were a bad mother. You know how people love to judge." I believed her. I didn't consider that some of the loudest judging I'd ever heard had come from her. For context, my mother, Carol, is one of those women everyone in town calls a saint. She runs the church food pantry, organizes prayer chains, brings casseroles to every family with a new baby or a death. Growing up, our house was the house for Bible study, youth group, neighborhood kids whose parents worked late. On the outside, she is sweetness and service. On the inside, she is control dressed up as concern. When I got pregnant with Lily at 23, my mother's first words were, "Of course it's happening like this," like my uterus had done it to her on purpose. When I told her I was marrying Marcus, she said, "You're making a mistake, but we'll support you, because that's what family does," in a tone that made support sound like, "Keep a running tally of your failures until I can say I told you so." When the marriage fell apart, his cheating, his drinking, his disappearing for weekends, she never once said, "I'm proud of you for leaving." Instead, she said, "Well, you made your bed," then turned around and told every church lady who would listen that her daughter was holding it together for the children, like she was the hero of my divorce. I moved into my own place with the kids after the split. Mom cried about empty nest and those babies being so far away, even though I was 15 minutes down the highway. From day one, she had opinions on everything. How I fed them, how I dressed them, how much screen time they got, whether I was distracted by dating, instead of pouring myself out for my children the way she believed a mother should. You don't have the luxury of being selfish, she'd say. You chose to have them. You chose to leave your husband. They didn't ask to be born. The thing is, I agreed with parts of that. They didn't ask to be born. They deserved stability. That's why I stayed in a job I hated for a steady paycheck. That's why I budgeted down to the penny and bought store-brand everything. That's why I dragged myself out of bed on mornings after crying myself to sleep and packed lunches with stupid little love notes. But with my mother, my best never seemed to be enough. So when CPS showed up the first time, I called her in tears, and she made comforting noises and said, "Some people just like drama, honey. You know how it is." And I let myself believe it was random. It was not random. Over the next 18 months, CPS came 13 more times. Once because a neighbor reported that the kids were playing outside unsupervised. They weren't. I was on the porch, literally in view. Once because someone said Mason had bruises on his arms that looked like fingerprints. He did. From where he'd fallen off the monkey bars and grabbed the bars on the way down. Once because my apartment smelled like marijuana. It did not. My downstairs neighbor smoked cigarettes like a chimney, but that was it. Each time a polite, tired social worker would show up, look around my little apartment, peek into the fridge, maybe talk to the kids, and then leave with some variation of, "Everything seems fine here, Ms. Baker, but we're required to investigate every report." The kids started calling them the clipboard ladies. Lily learned to roll her eyes and say, "Yes, we have food. No, Mom doesn't hit us. Yes, I have my own bed." Mason started asking, "Did we do something bad?" And my heart broke a little more each time. Back then I thought it was my ex. It made sense. He hated paying child support, complained that the system is rigged for moms, and had once threatened to get the kids taken away when I refused to let him skip months of payments. I even called him one night after visit number 6 and said, "Marcus, if this is you, you're messing with the wrong people. You're scaring the kids." He sounded genuinely shocked. "Babe, I'm not that petty," he said. "Besides, CPS has already come out to my place once because somebody said I was drunk around them. I thought it was you." That threw me. It hadn't been me. I'd thought about it in low moments when I knew for a fact he'd driven them home after a couple beers, but I hadn't picked up the phone because I was terrified they'd take the kids away from both of us. Someone else then was stirring the pot on both sides. I vented to my mother. "Maybe it's that woman he's seeing," she suggested. "Some girls will do anything to get a man to themselves. Maybe she wants the kids gone so you two will stop talking." "Maybe," I said, even though something tight in my chest didn't buy it completely. Every time CPS left, Mom would sigh with relief, then slip in some comment like, "You know, if it ever gets too hard, we'd take the kids. They'd have their own rooms here. We'd make sure they had home-cooked meals every night, not freezer dinners. They deserve that." The implication being, you can't quite give them what they deserve, can you? It slowly dawned on me over those months that my mother was both comforting me and planting a seed of doubt. "If you just moved back home," she'd say, "I could help more. I could make sure they're really taken care of." I always said no. I knew what moving back home meant. It meant my mother calling all the shots again. What the kids ate, what they wore when they went to bed, what I was allowed to spend my own money on. I'd done that dance once as a teenager. I wasn't doing it again as an adult. Then came the night that broke everything open. Mason had an asthma attack in the middle of the night. He'd had reactive airways as a toddler, but it had been years since anything serious. We ended up in the ER again. While a respiratory therapist hovered over him with a nebulizer, I answered questions. "Yes, he has an inhaler. No, we haven't needed it in months. Yes, we have insurance. No, I am not a smoker." Sometime around 3 a.m. exhausted, I texted my mom. "At R with Mason. Asthma. He's okay, just getting treatments." Her response came quick. "I knew this would happen. Those apartments are full of mold. He needs a real home." The next day, CPS knocked again. This time it wasn't Denise. It was a man in his 40s named Carl, with a calm face and very tired eyes. "We got another report," he said. "This time about medical neglect. The caller said you refused proper treatment for your son's breathing issues." I actually laughed, which came out like a half-hysterical bark. "He's literally still got the hospital band on his wrist," I said, pointing at Mason, who was building a Lego tower on the living room rug and wheezing slightly through his spacer. "I was there all night. I haven't slept." Carl glanced at the discharge papers I shoved at him and nodded slowly. "I can see that," he said. "Look, off the record, do you have any idea who might be making these calls? Because we're up to double digits now, and they're all coming from the same number." I froze. "The same number," I repeated. "So it's not anonymous?" "Anonymous to you," he said. "We have caller ID. We log everything. I can't share the name without a subpoena, but I can tell you it's the same person every time, and they identify themselves as a close family member who is deeply concerned about the children's welfare. And when we come out and don't find anything, they escalate the claims next time." My stomach dropped. "Escalate how?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "The most recent report said you regularly leave the children alone overnight while you entertain multiple men. That's not a misunderstanding. That's malicious." My face burned so hot I thought I might pass out. "I have literally been on exactly 3 dates in the last 2 years, I said. "And my kids were at my mother's house each time because she insisted they sleep over, even though they're old enough to stay with a sitter." Carl nodded slowly. "I kind of figured," he said. "Your home is always clean. There's always food. The kids are bonded to you. The school has never reported concerns. Honestly, if it weren't for the sheer volume of calls, this case would have been closed months ago. Somebody has an agenda." An agenda. The word rang in my head. An agenda that involved getting my kids out of my home and into where? My mother's? My ex's? Foster care? "What happens," I asked, "if the calls keep coming?" He sighed. "At a certain point we have to escalate," he said. "We'd staff it with our supervisor, maybe file with the court. Even if we don't find evidence of abuse, the ongoing concerns can trigger more formal involvement. Which is why I'm telling you. Whoever this is, you might want to talk to them." I thought immediately of my ex again, of the girlfriend, of nosy neighbors. I did not even then want to believe it was my mother, because despite all the judgment and control, she loved those kids. She baked them cookies. She took them to church. She framed their school pictures. What kind of person weaponizes CPS against her own daughter? The kind of person who believes she knows better than everyone, a voice in my head whispered, and who is used to getting her way. A week later I found out. I was at my mother's house dropping the kids off for Sunday dinner. She likes to parade them around at church and then keep them for the afternoon so she can show off her grandma role. I was washing dishes while she and Lily worked on a craft at the table, and Mason played with toy cars on the floor. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a text preview from one of her church friends. "How's the custody case going? Did CPS set a court date yet?" My heart slammed against my ribs. Custody case. CPS. I dried my hands and while Mom fussed with glitter, thumbed her phone open. "Don't clutch your pearls, Internet. I know that's a violation of privacy, but curiosity and fear won." The messages above that one were from my mother. "Yes, it's been so hard. We've had to call CPS so many times. They finally seem to be taking it seriously. Kids deserve better than the chaos she's giving them." Next one. "If the judge sees the full file, I'm sure we'll get placement. Pray they open their eyes." I nearly dropped the phone in the sink. My hands shook as I scrolled up. There were weeks' worth of messages to different people, all in the same tone. "Poor me, my daughter is a mess. These poor children, we've had to call CPS again. We're doing everything we can to save them." One message made my stomach flip entirely. "Met with caseworker Thursday. She says if we can show a pattern, court might grant us guardianship." I snapped a picture of the thread with my own phone before my courage failed me. Then another and another. Evidence. Finally, my brain whispered, proof you're not crazy. Everything okay? My mother asked behind me, making me jump. I locked her phone and set it down. Yeah, I said, voice weird. Fine. Just checking the time. I didn't confront her then. I needed more. Needed time to think. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention. Mom would say things like, if CPS asks, you can tell them you prefer staying here. They listen to children, you know. To Lily in this faux casual tone, like she was just preparing her. She'd text me, did you get that cough looked at? CPS doesn't like it when kids are sick too much. Every comment was dipped in honey and barbed underneath. The final straw came from Lily herself. One night at my apartment, she was coloring at the table while I made dinner. Out of nowhere, she said, why does Grandma say you're tired all the time because you're maybe depressed? I froze with the spoon in my hand. She said that. I asked. Lily nodded, still coloring. She tells people you're struggling. That's why she has to help so much. She said if we ever feel unsafe, we can tell the lady with the clipboard, and it would be better for us in the long run. What does that mean? My mouth went dry. I sat down across from her. Do you feel unsafe here? I asked. No, she said, like I'd asked if she felt unsafe at Disney World. She just says you're overwhelmed and don't always make good choices. Like letting Mason stay up too late with the tablet or us eating pizza 2 nights in a row. She said some mommies aren't made for being mommies full-time. My vision went red at the edges. You know that's not true, right? I said. That last part, I mean. I may get tired. I may not make homemade meals every night. But I am made to be your mom. That's my job. Lily shrugged. I know, she said. You're better at laundry than Grandma. You don't shrink my shirts. I laughed, but it came out watery. Do me a favor, I said. Next time Grandma says anything about the lady with the clipboard, can you record her on your phone? Just so I can hear exactly what she's saying. Lily raised an eyebrow. 10 going on 30. Like a spy, she said. Like a journalist, I said. Sometimes grown-ups say different things to different people. I need to know which things she's saying about me. Okay, she said slowly. But if she catches me, I'm blaming you. Deal, I said. 2 weeks later, Lily handed me her phone after school and said, you owe me ice cream. And maybe a pony. The audio file was 15 minutes long. I listened to it sitting on the edge of my bathtub with the shower running so Mason wouldn't hear. On it, my mother's voice was smooth and coaxing. Honey, I know you love your mom, she said. We all do. She just gets overwhelmed. Sometimes she forgets things. Like your inhaler, remember? Or she gets distracted and you and Mason have to make your own dinner. We had cereal, Lily's voice protested faintly. That was fun. Yes, but that's not healthy, Mom said. If the lady from CPS asks, you can just tell her the truth. That you sometimes feel scared when Mommy yells. That you have to take care of Mason because she's so tired. That you wish you could live somewhere you didn't have to worry. It's okay to tell the truth. But I don't wish that, Lily said. I like living with Mom. There was a pause, then my mother's voice sharper. You like living in a place where you almost got locked out because your mom's car broke down? She said. Where you can hear the neighbors fighting through the walls. Where there are strange men in the parking lot at all hours. We don't go outside at night, Lily said. Mom says it's not safe. Exactly, Mom said. You shouldn't have to live somewhere that's not safe. If you tell CPS that you feel safer here, maybe they'll let you live here. You'd have your own room. Grandma would make you breakfast every morning. No more worrying about whether Mom is going to cry in the bathroom again. My heart clenched at that. The idea of her watching me cry through the bathroom door and filing it under reason to be taken away made me want to both crawl out of my skin and go hug my 10-year-old self. The recording went on. Mom mentioned the judge. Mentioned the case. Said, if they ask where you want to live, you can say with Grandma. That's not betraying your mom. It's helping her. Maybe if she has time to get herself together, she'll be better. I took the recording to my lawyer. Yes, by then I had a lawyer. Because not long after that conversation with Carl about the same caller, I'd gotten a certified letter in the mail, notice of petition for temporary guardianship. Petitioner, Carol Collins. Respondent, Sarah Baker. Subject, Lily Baker and Mason Baker. My own mother had gone to the courthouse, filled out paperwork, and asked a judge to give her legal guardianship of my children on the basis of ongoing CPS involvement and concerns about maternal mental health and living conditions. I sat in her office while my lawyer, Ms. Hernandez, played the recording 3 times, her face getting tighter with each replay. So your mother is coaching your child to make statements to CPS that will support her petition, she said finally. Yes, I said. And she's the one making the reports, according to the caseworker. Ms. Hernandez nodded slowly. That's what we're going to show the judge, she said. You're lucky the caseworker was honest with you. We can subpoena the CPS call logs. With this recording and your mother's texts, we've got a strong argument that she's weaponizing the system, not protecting your kids. Court was still the worst day of my life. Walking into that building, seeing my mother sitting at the petitioner's table in her nicest church dress, clutching a Bible and a tissue, was like stepping into some alternate reality where up was down. She wouldn't look at me. Her lawyer, a smug man with a perfect tie, smiled at me like I was an inconvenience. The judge read through the file, the CPS reports, the concerns, the petition. My mother dabbed at her eyes at all the right moments. Your Honor, her lawyer said, Mrs. Collins has acted out of love and concern for her grandchildren. Over the last 3 years, she has repeatedly observed conditions in Ms. Baker's home that are concerning. Lack of food, poor hygiene, children left unsupervised while Ms. Baker is engaged in questionable activities. That's a lie, I muttered, earning a warning look from my own attorney. My mother's lawyer went on. He painted a picture of a chaotic home in a dangerous complex, a mother struggling with depression and instability, and grandparents who had stepped in countless times to provide stability. He even handed up a letter supposedly from their pastor, talking about my troubled adolescence and ongoing poor choices. The pastor who, fun fact, hadn't seen me since I was 19 and moved out. When it was our turn, Ms. Hernandez stood, calm and steady. Your Honor, she said, we don't dispute that Ms. Baker has faced challenges as a single mother. She works full-time. She lives in a modest neighborhood. She has had CPS called to her home numerous times. However, the evidence shows that those calls have not been the result of actual neglect, but of a campaign by the petitioner to create a paper trail of concern to support this very petition. The judge raised an eyebrow. Those are strong words, counselor, he said. Do you have proof? I do, she said, and that's when she handed up the CPS call log. Every call for the last 2 years from the same number. My mother's number. Listed plainly. As you can see, she said, the vast majority of reports were made by the same individual, who identified herself alternately as a neighbor, a family friend, and the children's grandmother. She has reported everything from imaginary drug use to fabricated physical abuse. CPS has visited the home 13 times and found no evidence to support removal. The children's school reports no issues. Their pediatrician's records show regular checkups, immunizations, and appropriate care. The only consistent variable here is Mrs. Collins. Mom's face went pale under her makeup. Her lawyer tried to object, something about privileged information, but the judge waved him off. CPS logs are admissible, he said. Continue. We also have text messages, Ms. Hernandez said, in which Mrs. Collins discusses her intent to seek guardianship and her belief that, if the judge sees the full file, we'll get placement. And we have this. She nodded to me. My hand shook as I handed over Lily's phone with the audio file queued up. The judge put on headphones. The courtroom was silent except for the faint buzz of air conditioning and the pounding of my heart. I watched the judge's face as he listened to my mother telling my daughter to talk about how overwhelmed I was, how unsafe our apartment was, How she should tell CPS she wanted to live with Grandma. His jaw tightened. When he took the headphones off, his expression was cold. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "do you deny that this is your voice?" My mother swallowed. "I was simply encouraging the child to be honest," she said. "My daughter is very sensitive. She doesn't see when she's struggling. I was trying to protect those babies by telling them they'd be better off living with you instead of their mother," the judge said. "By repeatedly calling CPS with exaggerated or false reports. By misrepresenting yourself as an anonymous neighbor. That is not protection. That is manipulation." Her lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, we maintain that Mrs. Collins has acted in good faith." "Enough," the judge said sharply. He turned to me. "Ms. Baker, CPS has not recommended removal. The school and medical records are in order. The children's attorney reports that both children wish to remain with you. Is that accurate?" My throat closed up. I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor," I managed. "They want to stay home." He nodded once. "Then this court sees no basis to remove them," he said. "The petition for guardianship is denied." I sagged in my seat. My legs felt like they might give out. Ms. Hernandez squeezed my shoulder. "Furthermore," the judge said, turning back to my mother, "this court is deeply concerned by the petitioner's misuse of child protective services. Those resources exist to protect children from real harm, not to facilitate intrafamily power struggles. I suggest, Mrs. Collins, that you consider the damage you are doing to your relationship with your daughter and grandchildren. Continued unwarranted reports could result in legal consequences." My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I was just trying to help," she whispered. "They'd be better off with me." "That is not your decision to make," the judge said. "Court is adjourned." Outside the courtroom, my mother rounded on me. "I hope you're happy," she hissed. "You humiliated me in front of the whole church council. Pastor Mark heard every word." "You tried to take my kids," I said, still shaking. "You lied to the state. You manipulated my daughter. You're lucky the judge didn't charge you with filing false reports." "I did what any good grandmother would do," she said, eyes shining with righteous fury. "I saw my grandchildren in danger and I acted. You are too blinded by your own selfishness to see how much they need me. They need a grandmother who doesn't call CPS on their mother 14 times, I said. They need peace. Something you apparently can't stand to let them have." She sniffed. "We'll see what they think when they're teenagers and you can't control them," she said. "Don't come crying to me when they blame you for growing up in that dump." She walked away then, heels clicking on the marble, head high. If you glanced at her, you'd think she was the wronged party. Some days I think she believes that. The fallout was ugly. Half my relatives heard my mother's version first, that she had no choice but to petition for guardianship because I'm unstable, that the judge misunderstood, that CPS is afraid of making the wrong call nowadays. They look at me like I'm the one who dragged family business into court. My grandmother on my dad's side called to say she was disappointed I'd made trouble for my mother, because she's just trying to help. But then there was my Aunt Jo, my mother's younger sister, who pulled me aside at Thanksgiving and said, "I'm sorry," with tears in her eyes. "I should have warned you. She did something similar when you were little." I blinked. "What do you mean?" I asked. Aunt Jo glanced around the kitchen, lowered her voice. "You don't remember this. You were 3, she said. Your dad was drinking a lot back then. Your mom went to court to get emergency custody, said he was dangerous. Some of it was true, some of it she embellished. Our mama, your grandma, found out she'd lied about some stuff and tried to intervene. Your mom stopped talking to her for 5 years. Told everybody grandma was on your daddy's side. She's always been like this. Once she decides she knows what's best, she'll burn down the world to make it true." I thought about that for a long time. About how my mother had always painted herself as the hero of every story, the brave wife who saved me from a drunk father, the long-suffering homemaker who sacrificed for us, the noble grandmother who tried to rescue the kids from my allegedly chaotic life. In her mind, calling CPS wasn't abuse. It was heroism. The fact that it nearly ripped my children out of their home was collateral damage. CPS finally closed the case when the judge denied her petition. Carl came by one last time, sat at my chipped kitchen table and said, "We're marking this as unsubstantiated and flagging future reports from this caller as potentially malicious. That doesn't mean they'll never check again, but the pattern is clear." "Thank you," I said, and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything to a bureaucrat. "I'm sorry," he said. "This kind of thing, it makes our job harder. We get jaded. Then a real case comes along and we're slower to believe. Your mother isn't just hurting you. She's wasting resources that could save other kids." That thought has kept me up more nights than I care to admit. My kids are okay. Other kids aren't. And my mother made it harder for the helpers to do their job. I went no contact with her for a while after court. I blocked her number. I told her, in an email my therapist helped me write, that she was not welcome at my home and would not see the kids until she acknowledged what she'd done and got help. She responded with a long, dramatic Facebook post about being cut off from your grandchildren by a bitter daughter that got 100 sympathy comments and prayers. My phone buzzed for days with relatives sending me screenshots. I ignored most of them. The kids asked questions, of course. "Why can't we see Grandma?" Mason asked, small and confused. "Did she do something bad?" "She made some choices that weren't safe for us," I said carefully. "She told people things that weren't true, and those people tried to take you away. Until she can understand why that was wrong and promise not to do it again, we need some space." Lily, who had heard the recording of her own voice being used like a weapon, didn't ask for visits. "She can FaceTime me when she apologizes," she said. "Like really apologizes. Not one of her 'I'm sorry you feel that way' non-apologies. The kid has my number and my mother's. Therapy has helped. For them and for me. We talk about boundaries, about safe adults, about how love without respect isn't really love at all. My therapist has a phrase she uses: you can love someone from a distance. Right now, that distance is measured in miles and in supervised visits. Because yes, eventually I softened enough to allow a very limited relationship. After a year, my mother sent a letter. Not perfect, not an admission of everything, but something. She acknowledged that she may have overstepped, that she let her fear drive her into actions that hurt us. She did not use the words "I lied," but she did say, "I understand now that calling CPS so many times made you feel unsafe and betrayed. It wasn't the full truth, but it was a crack in the armor. For the kids' sake, I opened the door a tiny bit." Now, 3 years after that first CPS visit, my mother sees them once every couple of months, for lunch in public places with me present. She is on her best behavior. She brings gifts. She asks God to heal this family. Every time we pray over the food, she still occasionally slips in little digs. "If you ever need a place to stay, you know Grandma's house is always open. But one look from me usually shuts it down. There are days I feel guilty about that. My kids only get one grandmother. Am I robbing them of something by keeping her at arm's length?" Then I remember Lily's voice on that recording, small and uncertain, being asked to choose between safety and love. I remember Mason waking up with nightmares about the lady with the clipboard taking him away. I remember standing in that courtroom, listening to my own mother's lawyer describe me as unstable and negligent, and watching my mother nod along. That's not the kind of love I want my children to internalize as normal. So that's my story, internet strangers. I'm the mom who did all the late nights and early mornings, all the school projects and her visits, who budgeted every penny to keep the lights on, who thought CPS was stalking her for no reason, only to find out it was her own mother calling the hotline over and over, painting her as an abusive, neglectful parent so she could build a case to get custody of the grandkids and the checks that come with being a kinship caregiver. I took pictures of my mother's texts. I had my daughter record a conversation I wish she'd never had to hear. I watched a judge tell my mom to her face that she was manipulating the system. And then I had to look my kids in the eye and explain why grandma wasn't safe, at least not the way a grandma should be. Even now, with supervised lunches and stiff small talk, I feel like I'm walking a tightrope between protecting them and cutting off a blood relative completely. So if you were in my shoes, if you discovered that your own mother had made 14 false CPS reports about you, coached your children to say they wanted to live with her, and then walked into a courtroom asking a judge to take your kids away so she could raise them properly, would you do what I did and pull back hard, go low or no contact, only allow carefully supervised visits and never again trust her with your kids alone? Or would you eventually forgive, let her back into your home and your children's lives more fully for the sake of family, hoping she'd learned her lesson, even though she'd already proved how far she's willing to go to get her way?